Hello, good day to you. Today I am going to describe how to use pidstat for performance analysis of a Linux system or analysis of a particular application. So pidstat is one of the tools you should have in your tool bag when you are analyzing the performance of a particular application. This tool is particularly good, when you need to analyze, how a particular application is how a particular application is doing in terms of resource consumption and in terms of overall health of the application. So let's check out the man page basically to get a little bit of information. So we look at man page of pidstat. So it tells us pidstat, reports activity. Pidstat reports statistics for Linux tasks. So also if you look at the description, it tells us pidstat command is used for monitoring individual tasks currently being managed by the Linux kernel. So there are 2 points there, that pidstat, is used for monitoring individual tasks, and also that task must be being currently being managed by the Linux kernel. So without further ado, let's talk about installation. To install pidstat, you have to install a package called sysstat. So you go to your system. I am on this system I have here is Ubuntu 16.10. So on Ubuntu, you can use apt install or sysstat. I have already installed it on my system, but you can also install it on your system with your default package manager, whether Fedora, Red Hat, or whatever distribution you are using. So we have installed it. Let's talk about the usage. So to use pidstat, if I run pidstat ordinarily on my system, I get information about all the processes that is running on my system. By default, it tells me the UID, of the user running this process, the process ID, or the percentage, of CPU usage in the user space, percentage of CPU usage in the system or kernel space. Guest refers to or percentage of CPU dedicated to a particular virtual machine. If you are running virtual machine on that system, then percentage CPU is the total or percentage CPU utilization. And lastly, CPU, tells us about what particular CPU is running this application at this moment. So, and also you have the command, that you use for that command for the process. So, on modern computers, you have multiple CPUs. So at times you might want to know what CPU is running your process. This is what this talks about. So, but this is not the at times this is not the best way to run pidstat. At times the best way to run pidstat is to run it against a particular application. So if you know the process ID of your application, you run it with -p and you specify the process ID of the application. So for example, I have Firefox on my system. So let me get the process ID of my Firefox. So the process ID is 8588. So if I want to analyze Firefox on my system, I will run pidstat-p and I will give it the process ID of Firefox. So you see, by default, it gives me information about the user ID, process ID, user space, system space, the guest, and overall CPU usage, and the CPU that's currently running this application. So, but at times you might want to get uh, an average of the usage of these of resource consumption of a particular process. So to get an average, you can run the pidstat process or the program multiple times with an interval. So for example, I can run pidstat against Firefox at interval of, let's say, 3 seconds, and I want to run it 5 times. So it's going to go at interval of 3 seconds and five times. So let's do it. So let me try to generate some activity on my Firefox. Let me try to go to Amazon web page, or let me click on some things. So you see that on average, so you see it ran 5 times, then it gave me an average. On average, Firefox use CPU 73%, and out of that 74%. Out of that 74.73%, most of it was in the user space, 7.71.13, or three, like less than 4% was in the kernel space. So that is it. So then you see the CPU. You see that different CPUs, were servicing Firefox at different times. So this gives you average. I think the average gives you a little bit of more factual picture of how your application is behaving. So this is very important. So there's another option that is also important, is -R, which gives you information about memory utilization. So let's run this with -R. So let me remove this interval. I will just put -R. So -R gives us information about, or gives us the user ID, the process ID, the minor page faults, major page faults. So minor page fault per second, major page fault per second, or the total virtual memory size. This is the total virtual memory size for Firefox. The resident, or memory. The residence memory is the actual memory, or it tells you the portion of your physical memory, that is your RAM, that Firefox is using. So that this is what this resident memory is. So, and also the percentage, of the overall memory. So that means Firefox is using 11%, or maybe like 12% of your RAM. So let's run it at interval again. So like I said, the at interval and multiple times. So when you run it multiple times, you get a little bit of a more factual representation of your resource consumption. So you see, at the end, it gives you the average. So this is the average memory consumption. So then we have the page fault, the minor page fault. There is no major page fault, or the total virtual memory size, the resident memory, and the percentage. So that is about memory. So let's go forward. Another very useful one is thread analysis. So like most of this process, they have threads that are working at behind the scene. So they are working behind the scenes. So but if you want to know the threads and the threads, you have to use -T. So how the threads are performing. So that is for Firefox. Firefox actually has a couple of threads. So you see, the main thread is here, the Firefox. Then you have other threads, Gmain, GDBox, Gecko IO thread, timer, link monitor, socket thread, JS Watchdog, JS Helper. So these are all the threads, that Firefox uses, behind the scene. So things like DNS Resolver. So it has actually some threads dedicated to DNS resolution, or some threads, dedicated to passing HTML5 or URL classifier. So these are all the threads that work behind the scenes. So you can really know which of these threads actually uses the most of the CPU. So which of the thread actually, is doing most of the work, which of the thread is actually spending the most time on the CPU. So this is really good. I use this a lot, in my uh, daily work as a performance engineer. So it is good. So that is about thread and the analysis of the individual threads. So and also on the issue of thread, you can also see the thread ID. So you have the thread ID in case you need to know the thread ID of a particular thread. So another one is dash u, but dash u also is the default. Is the default that you get. So if you use dash u, so it is the same thing as that you get, if you just run, pidstat, with dash p. It talks about the CPU utilization. So you have, like I said, the user ID, process ID, percentage of user space, percentage of system, percentage on guest, and the total percentage. So let's go on. Let's go to IO. So this is input output. So if you want to know how much of the how your application is performing in terms of the IO, so let's run it with some interval. So you get the read per second, the kilobyte read per second, write per second. Uh, I don't know exactly. I can look. Let's check the man page for what that means. Um, on the dash D, so we have the number of kilobytes task as cost to read per second, number of kilobytes written to disk per second, and number of kilobytes whose writing to disk has been cancelled by the task. Okay, so this is number of kilobytes whose writing to disk has been cancelled by the task, per second. So this is some of the things that you analysis you can get, for for your application. So and you can combine this, to with the thread. So if you want to basically see, this will give us a lot of information, but I mean I'm just trying to show you that you can analyze the input output on the thread of that process also. So I think another one is the dash uppercase C. So at times, if you don't know uh the name of your sorry, if you don't know the process ID, if you don't know the process ID of your application, for example, I know Firefox runs on my system. Let's say I don't know the process ID. I can type maybe part of the word or part of the command that's was that of the name of that process. So for example, I run pidstat dash uppercase C on fire. So there are actually two processes that have fire in their name, and one of them is firewall D, the other one is Firefox. So, but let's say now I want to focus on firewall D. So now I can focus on firewall D by using the name. So rather than uh using the process ID. So that may become useful. So another one important option is also dash W. So this is to get information about the switching activities. So for example, if I want to know uh, the switching activities of Firefox, I use dash W. So this tells us the number of context switches. So things like this is the context switches and also non-voluntary context switches. so per second. So if you want to know how many context switches is going on, on your application. So context switches can be some expensive, one of some of the expensive things. If your application is behaving strangely, you can check out, how many context switches the application is performing. That will give you also indication about overall health of that particular process or application. So the last option I have here is p dash dash p hall. So dash p hall is actually the same thing as if I don't put any option. So it tells me um the statistics for all the processes that are currently running on this system. Processes that are being managed by the kernel at this point in time. But like I said, one of the most useful options is dash P, with the process ID, or maybe dash uppercase C with the name of the process. So, and you can use these two with combination of any of these options. So to get information about your system or your application. So like I said, this is very good for if you want to investigate the performance of a specific application, maybe your database, your web server, or whatever application. This is a good tool. And the man page also, is good for you to gather information, or about what else you can do. There are some other things you can do. There are some other options that I didn't cover that you may want to know about. So yeah, and but I think I covered the most basic options that I find to be very useful, and I think you will also find it useful, from time to time. So, thank you for watching. If you have any comments, any addition, any subtraction, or observation, uh, please put it in the comment section and let me know what you think. Thank you for watching. See you in some other videos. Bye.